Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this beautiful EUC End User Computing webinar. For those of you that have joined us before, welcome back. And for the new people, welcome to the first session for EUC. My name is Nancy Govender. I'm from iOCO Cloud and Security, and I will be presenting what our introduction to iOCO actually is. And of course, I will take you through a few things of who we are, what we do, and I will then hand over to Malcolm Clark, who is our EUC specialist from AWS. Okay, so who exactly are we? So iOCO Cloud is a business that was started 11 years ago by Mr. Richard Vesta, who I hope is on the call with us today. Since we have grown into a cloud division, we've also grown into the hyperscale world where we embraced AWS 7 years ago. We are a customer-centric organization, and of course, we look to solve problems for customers from a business or from a strategic perspective. We are a larger systems integrator in Africa with over 4,000 expertise around the world. We do have an international presence, which of course keeps us in base and keeps us in line with international trends that are actually happening. We love to do customer-centric approaches with regards to microservices as well as cloud-ready architectures, and this is really the area that we play with. We love our partnerships with our strategic OEMs, such as AWS, who we are with today. And of course, we love building that friendship a little bit more so that we can then explore what's happening in the market and how best we can support our customers. Okay. So how exactly do we do things? With our customer first and centric approach, we then lead with AWS in the hyperscale arena. We boast 130 certifications, and that is growing on a daily basis, as well as a migrations competency. And of course, being an advanced partner of AWS, we've also streamed into other services such as SAP, VMC, DevOps, and EKS. This coupled with the next-gen managed services for cloud, we find that the best solutions and architectures for customers actually play in this particular space as well. We do understand that there are multiple business drivers to moving into cloud, such as agility, end-of-life hardware and software, as well as going global. A lot of customers, such as yourselves, are looking at digital transformation, as well as technological transformations, and we are there at the behest to actually help you get through that strategy, right from the very beginning, right up until the end. And how do we do this? We do this via AWS. So as you would know, AWS has an array of services that we love playing with, and we like taking this to our customers just to solve and to help them build their strategic transformations. One such service is end user computing, which you are here for today and which we'll be diving into a little bit more with Malcolm. And of course, just to understand exactly how this could benefit you, being a centralized system for your desktop and for your anywhere available systems that you could use for desktop. I will hand over to Malcolm, but before I do, I'd like to encourage you to type in your questions in the chat or at the end of the session, just so that we can table those questions for you. I'd like to invite you to enjoy the session, and please do ask as many questions as you like. Welcome aboard, and I will hand over to Malcolm.
Thank you, Nancy. Right, let me just share my screen. Give me 1 second. Let's see. Can everybody see my screen? Okay, I'm just going to switch to full screen mode. If PowerPoint decides to play ball with me, and I will just presenter mode. Right, can everybody see my screen? Hopefully you can. First and foremost, thank you ever so much for taking the time to join us on this call today. And thank you, Nancy, and the team at iOCO, including Alexia, who you can see on the screen there, for all their support in setting up this session. This is a follow-on to an EUC customer day that we did in South Africa a couple of months ago now. What we wanted to do is just to capture some of the highlights from that day and cover them in a follow-up for those of you that unfortunately may not be able to attend on the day, or you maybe didn't necessarily manage to grab all the information that you wanted. But to sort of kick things off, to introduce myself, my name's Malcolm Clark. I sit in what we call at AWS our end user compute specialist sales organization. And what that means is I look at services, including what you can see on screen here, our services that support virtual desktop, application delivery, SaaS conversion, etc. And I do that using services that we will cover today. But one of the things that I just want to touch on before I start is, You know, why am I doing this? End user computing to me goes back probably nearly 20 years. I spent an extended time working at Microsoft, working within their hardware business, focusing on the relationships that they have with OEMs, as well as the delivery of software and services that support those. Over the course of the last sort of 10 or 15 years, I've seen the evolution of cloud, and I've been very lucky enough to be a part of that journey. Where I am today is I'm really excited to talk to you about these services that we have and how we deliver them in market, and why we feel they are slightly different than perhaps other services you may have heard of or may have seen. I've put some of my details on the screen. They'll also be on the closing slide, so feel free to reach out to me. But as Nancy says, at any time, you know, put questions in the chat. We'll do our best to answer them. I'm sure that there will be some. The other thing that I want to just make sure is that everybody really understands what we mean by these services. So to let me kick that off, one of the questions that I get asked quite a lot is, you know, what is end user computing, and what is end user computing within AWS? Well, this is a really important question, because we've seen end user compute evolve quite considerably over the course of the last 20 or 30 years. Gone are the days whereby everybody just got themselves a laptop, or in fact less than that, they might have had a workstation on the desk. Certainly when I started working, we didn't have laptops. That show my age now, and we certainly only just about had the internet. So things have definitely moved on since that point. But what I would say, end user computing to me, you may have think of it in the lines of, I don't know, sort of VDI. So you could have relationships already with the likes of Citrix or VMware. You might be aware of some services that Microsoft have and been using them for an extensive period of time. This is a space that, you know, has been evolving, you know, since the days of Bill Gates announcing that everybody must have a PC on every desk in the office in every home. But as it's evolved, you know, what does it mean? Now, for me, it means exactly this. It is, for me, it's like gravity or the air that we breathe, because it really, really is everywhere. End user computing is that laptop, is that phone, is that tablet, is that desktop, is the evolution of those services, moving them into the cloud or moving them into a browser. In the past, the management of these services was always quite complex. Of course, because you'd have central IT, they were looking at all the different components to support them. But of course, that's moved on. And what businesses are now looking for is to take this gravity and this air that we breathe and simplify it as best that they can. So as we sort of dovetail that into your traditional, what we would class as end user computing, others may class as a modern workforce, we're starting to think about how the world has evolved. Over the course of the last few years, we've seen a global pandemic where everyone has had to work remotely or just work very differently. And so they've started to look at services in slightly different ways, whether that be, you know, how are they working from home? How are they working in the field? Or in fact, how are they finding a hybrid environment whereby they're having to do both? So what we've tried to do is look at some of these different personas as we describe them, as they're described on screen here, global hybrid user base, and actually try and apply our services to actually these different user personas. They could be generalist remote workers, knowledge workers. They could be task workers, independent tasks on a particular day. And at the end of that session, they don't need to save the work they've done, or it gets saved somewhere automatically. So when they come back in the future, they can go directly to that. You could think about something like a contact worker, someone that just needs it for that task. Could even be someone like a designer that's doing a design and to an environment, and then they're moving on and onto another project. Then, of course, you start to think about the different requirements for people outside of a company. You know, things, what do you do about contractors? What do you do about people in the field? What do you do about people that you don't actually even provide a device for? Because actually they still might need to gain access to different services and different tools. The other thing that we're seeing evolve now is businesses that traditionally invested really, really heavily into sort of hardware and software and services to support all of this, not to mention the resource, are now starting to think about how can I deliver higher levels of productivity to these different types of workforce whilst remaining agile enough and secure. And I guess the other kicker is cost. Everything costs money. So businesses are always looking for ways that they can save cost or get better bang for their buck. So what we're going to talk a little bit about today is how we have approached some of these services using our end user compute services. The other thing that I've just mentioned is how we've seen the workforce evolve. If I think about traditional VDI, for those of you that know what VDI is, your virtual desktop infrastructure, excuse me, it's still early. We've seen an evolution of businesses from moving from an on-premise environment where they may run their own data center to even looking at different cloud environments so that they can take that infrastructure on-premise and move it to the cloud so that they can have more control. But the challenge, of course, with that is you're still having to manage and maintain and all the different components to deliver that VDI environment. They don't necessarily give you it in a way that actually is dead simple for you to deliver. But what we're trying to do with our services is take an account for maximum return, maximum flexibility, maximum security support. It's, of course, moving to a way from your traditional to your fully managed. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means during the course of this session. So to get into the services, we've only got a little bit of time today, so I want to touch on these as best I can. But I'm not going to go into too much depth. My suggestion is if you look at any of these when we're going through this detail and you want to know more, reach out to the team at iOCO and myself, and we can set up a more dedicated session whereby we can look at your requirements and we can work backwards from what those are to really produce something that's customized to your space. But if we think about the services that we're considering here, is we are now developing end user compute services that support virtual desktop, that support application delivery, or even just creating a really secure environment for you to gain access to tools. The other thing that we've seen evolve more recently is businesses looking at these services to deliver their own services. So if you think about software vendors that are looking for ways that they can move to the cloud quickly and efficiently, whilst obviously managing all those things like cost and other elements, without having the pain, obviously having to rewrite a software in its entirety as it moves to the cloud. So we'll go into a bit more depth on each of these, and hopefully if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. Before we do that, if you looked on the previous slide, I had the word all-inclusive. And what does that mean? All-inclusive or managed, as it's described here, is a way that we can provide you all of the different components you need to deliver our services without the need to think about the different components or building blocks to deliver them within your organization. So if you think about how you would deliver or you would take delivery of a more traditional managed service, then all of those components included, pay as you go. When you're using it, you're paying for it. When you're not using it, you're not paying for it. So if we think about these services that I'm going to go into, all of those that you're seeing on the right, the only elements that you're not really having to think about are, the only elements that you need to consider are the images that are being delivered, which includes obviously the different applications or different services that you need. And of course, those users. This isn't something that we would do, but everything else is included in the cost of its delivery. More traditionally, you are going to be thinking about all those different components, but even if you look at trying to take your traditional to the cloud, you're still having to think about things like the control plane, the host, the storage, the directories, etc. So, service-wise, so we have 4 services that we're going to talk to you about today. The first of which is Amazon WorkSpaces. This is a fully managed, fully persistent, all-inclusive virtual desktop that we can deliver to you and your organization under a Windows umbrella, an Amazon Linux 2, or in fact, Ubuntu desktop, which is a service that we launched at the back end of last year. Now, what do we mean by fully managed? We mean in that when you're required to deliver a desktop, you can go to your console, you can provision that desktop, and you can deliver it pretty much on the spot. If you think about traditional VDI, these things can take weeks and months to set up, provision, and deliver. But with this kind of service, we can literally do it in minutes and hours. But what we need to try and understand is what are the requirements of the different users within your business, and then we will build out the different service to that particular requirement. Now, if we look at the different personas you're seeing on screen here, this is just an example of a few of them. Someone like a hybrid worker, which I mentioned earlier, could be someone working in an office, could be a call center, it could actually be a remote worker that occasionally comes into the office. You know, this is perfect because, of course, you're not having to provide them with a device that's managed by central IT. You can actually deliver it on their own device because we are talking about a virtual desktop where the actual desktop is delivered and managed out of the data center. And all they're really seeing is secure pixels on screen, and nothing is really running on that particular device. You can even lock down things like cut and paste, so nothing can be transposed across from that particular virtual desktop onto your own client device that you may be using. You've then got things like bring your own device, as I've just mentioned. You know, the beauty of this service, of course, is we can deliver you a Windows desktop, Windows 10 or Windows 11, depending on how you want to approach it. And we can give you that flexibility without having to actually even provide them with a piece of hardware. Now, this is wonderful if you've got contract workers that are not part of your organization, but are looking to still gain access to your tools or your particular services or applications. Then, of course, something we've seen evolve quite significantly over the course of the last couple of years, especially because of the pandemic, even high-end workers need access to certain services. These could be developers, these could be computer science, or more sort of high-end computer-intensive environments. So we're able to now deliver with a workspace, your lowest common denominator, your entry-level desktop, right the way up to your, your graphics enabled, your GPU enabled environments, to give you that access to those tools that you need so that you can be efficient irrespective of whether you're a very standardized worker or a high-end worker. And of course, let's not lose sight, this is a managed service. So as a managed service, you can even acquire yourself a high-end GPU desktop that you can acquire by the hour, or depending on how you use it, maybe want to be billed monthly. What I would suggest is, as we've only got a limited amount of time, is let's arrange a session if you want to understand a bit more depth, and I can take you through how we approach pricing and how we approach these services from the entry level right the way up to the high end in more sort of compute intensive or graphics intensive requirements. The other thing that we've seen evolve quite significantly is the use of these services for remote working or remote learning, excuse me. If we think about things like universities, and we're working with a huge number of universities at the moment, they have massive populations of students and staff. And of course, they need to gain access to certain tools or classroom environments, but actually they don't want to provision workstations in a particular classroom. They actually want to be able to do this remotely. So actually they can centrally control those classroom sessions, and they can do that under a pay-as-you-go model. So when they are using the service, of course, they're paying for it. And when they're not using, it's not being paid for. Now, the beauty of this, if we think about students, of course, you don't always know what students are going to come into class. So hopefully they'll all turn up on the day. But if they don't, we're still able to give them access to the services. The other thing, of course, about this is if you're thinking about certain environments whereby they have downtime. So if you take the academic world, there are certain times of the year maybe where they're having vacation or they're having time off. Then, of course, you're not going to be using this service. So you can just dial it down. But remembering this is obviously a pay-as-you-go. And of course, depending on, what they're learning, their core structure, you have that option, Windows, Linux, or Ubuntu, because of course, we actually do a lot of work also with computer scientists that are using everything from, as I say, Windows all the way across to Ubuntu desktops. Now, I've already covered some of these, but I would say the pillars of what we're trying to do here focus on 5 things. They focus on agility, productivity, security, reliability, and cost. Agility, I've already covered some of this. The beauty of this, because it is a managed service, you can turn it on and turn it off as your business flexes up or flexes down. Of course, the other beauty of this is because you don't always know within an environment what are the specific needs of users. So, of course, with this service, you can provision specific desktops for specific types of users. And actually, even on the fly, you have the ability to actually edit that so that the user on a particular day needs more compute or more intense environment, or in fact less. Then, of course, you have the ability to scale that in a direction that you want. The other thing I just mentioned was around productivity. Now, of course, this is super productive because these services are centralized services. Okay, so you don't have to be thinking about all of the different components within their environment, so which enables the users to be productive because they're just getting the bits that they need, but also means that your IT division are productive because they're not having to do all these additional tasks. All of these services, as I mentioned, fall under this particular model, which is pay-as-you-go, and of course under a managed service where the only things you're thinking about are the images and the users. Everything else is included. From a security perspective, as you would expect, this is AWS. So the underlying or the foundation of what we do is AWS as an environment. So you can set up your own VPC. You can use all of your standardized security tools that you might want, whether it be single sign-on, et cetera, et cetera. All of those are available to you. And of course, everything is encrypted. As I mentioned to you earlier, nothing is residing on the device. It's all sat within the data center. Something that we spent a lot of time on recently is what are we doing around reliability or failover? And if I think about an environment, for example, in South Africa, where you have load shedding, there are going to be those times perhaps where you lose connection. Or you have a particular scenario whereby you need an immediate failover. I think about the finance sector, for example. They have times whereby downtime to them can cost huge amounts of money. So not only have we put in place an SLA around the 99.9% uptime, which is financially backed, we've now developed failover services for DR so that you minimize those challenges. It can run out of one environment. If there is a challenge, that immediately fails over to another environment. Again, this is something we can explore with you if you want to understand in more depth. And lastly on screen, which is relevant to everybody, is around cost. The cost that you're seeing on our website for these services is fixed rate pricing, flat rate pricing, no upfront costs, no hidden charges. If you just need one desktop, that's entirely up to you. If you need 10,000, that's also up to you. We can work with you to ensure that you're getting best bang for your buck, and we can ensure that we're tailoring it to your needs. And as I mentioned earlier, the beauty of WorkSpaces is you can deliver it for as little as 1 hour or as long as you want. Now we have built-in tools so that you can automatically move across from hourly to monthly. And of course, monthly, as you would expect, would be more cost effective for you. We would typically say using these services beyond sort of 80 hours is the best point to be thinking about monthly. But of course, we have those auto scaling and provisioning services in there, so it can, as I say, migrate or flex depending on the direction that you're using it. The other thing that we have developed is we've done a lot of work around cost optimization, and we have tools that will look at your estate and dynamically move the user settings around, so actually they're always going to be running in their most optimized environment. Okay, so that was WorkSpaces. Fantastic service. Over the course of the last 3 years, especially because of the pandemic, we've seen exponential growth in the delivery of workspaces. More and more people now are looking for these sort of virtual desktop without the heavy sort of infrastructure that sits underneath them. But one of the services that we launched at the back end of last year was a service called WorkSpaces Core. And what happens with WorkSpaces Core is it takes your traditional VDI or virtual desktop infrastructure. It looks at that service to deliver that within the cloud. So if you think about, there are environments whereby you want to migrate your VMware, for example, to AWS. Absolutely, that is a way for you to do, there's a way for you to do that, and we can certainly point you in the right direction. But what we're talking about with WorkSpaces Core, using a set of APIs, we can take your VMware Horizon 8 environment and we can deliver that on a workspace. So you get the benefits of a workspace, as I mentioned to you earlier: agility, productivity, flexibility, security, and cost. But of course, you maintain that control plane that you're used to using. You might have been using, for example, VMware for many, many years. And of course, you're looking for a way to maintain that. You've invested in resourcing too. But of course, you're still keen on starting that journey to the cloud. So what WorkSpaces Core will do is it takes that control plane and all of the tool sets that you're used to using, and it moves that obviously to a workspace, of course, so that you have that flexibility. And as you can see on screen here, it's fairly similar in terms of the different use cases. And the reason for that is because in essence, or the baseline, the foundation of what we're doing from an AWS perspective is called WorkSpaces. And we're just giving you that, we're giving you that service so that you can maintain your current infrastructure and you can deliver that within our world. Now, we've delivered this service, as I said, we landed it in market about September last year. Our first partner that we started working with was VMware. So if you have Horizon 8 environments and you're looking for a way that you can migrate that to the cloud for all the benefits of the cloud, absolutely, this is something we can work with you on, and reach out to the iOCO team because this is something we can support you with. But we've also built relationships with WorkSpot and LeoStream, whom also have a similar setup. As you would expect, we are working with other vendors in the market that deliver VDI solutions, and over the course of whatever time frame, I'm sure there'll be other services coming to market. If you do have VMware, WorkSpot, or LeoStream, feel free to reach out to the team if you want to understand a bit more depth around how we approach this, and also how we approach things like pricing, etc. Now, for those of you that read the news, you may have seen that there's been a slight change in the delivery of certain Microsoft products from the 1st of August. Now, I'm going to put a caveat out there. I am not a Microsoft licensing specialist. I may have worked at Microsoft in the past, but I am not a licensing specialist. But I want to just get this message out to you. If you are using M365 or Microsoft 365 licensing today, and you're looking to move that to a cloud environment, one of the things that you can now do as part of the end user licensing agreement is move that to an Amazon Workspace, or in fact an Amazon Workspaces Core. This is something that we've been working with on for quite some time. In the past, you may have had to go and ask them for an exception to do so, but the beauty now is that's all done. And so if you are running M365 and you're looking to, to move to a cloud native virtual desktop, then Workspaces Core could be for you. In addition to that, and this hasn't changed, we can also offer you Microsoft Office, the applications that you get within Microsoft Office as part of our Workspaces bundle. So if you don't have Microsoft, but in terms of M365, but you would still like those applications as part of your service, this is something that we can do for you. There is obviously a cost associated with that, and certainly with the team at iOCO, we can explore that together. Just so that you know that that Microsoft licensing change happened as of the 1st of August, so it's relatively new. And nonetheless, if you need more detail, then feel free to reach out to us. Now, the third service that I want to talk to you about is a service that we call AppStream 2.0. AppStream 2.0 is slightly different to Workspaces. As I mentioned, Workspaces is that fully persistent virtual desktop, Windows, Linux, and Ubuntu. AppStream is slightly different. It does still provide you a virtual desktop, a cloud-based virtual desktop, but in essence, what we're trying to do here is deliver applications, one application or hundreds of applications, via what we call a selective persistent environment. This could be done through a browser. So you can have something that looks like an application view. So when you go to your browser, you log into it using your security protocols you might have as a business. You can see your applications, you select your application, and it opens up a fully rich environment as you would expect as if it was running on your desktop. We can also provide for you something that we call desktop view. So if you're used to using a Windows type desktop, but don't necessarily want to provide a full virtual desktop like a Windows 10 or in fact a Workspaces bundle, then this is something we can do for you. We can provide you this Windows 10 environment. So you have your start menu, your shortcuts, etc., to all the applications that you need. But there's something that I want to be really, really clear on here. Unlike Workspaces, which is what we call a persistent desktop, i.e. the desktop remains with the user irrespective of whether they're logged in or they're logged out and they come back again, this is what we describe as selective persistence. So an AppStream instance lives and dies during that particular session. So if I think about something like a task worker, could be a contact center, it could be someone doing design work, for example, and they're looking for a service to interact with applications, or they're looking for a way to interact with a customer or something like this, maybe during a shift, then this could be the way forward for you. With selective persistence, the actual session lives and dies during that particular task or that particular session, but we are able to persist user settings and storage settings. So when you come back, some of your profile detail is saved, and it takes you back to where you were previously. And if you've saved your work previously, and of course, you can pull that back in. Now, AppStream, if you know a little bit about AWS, it defaults to S3, which is our storage service. But of course, if you want to use something else, that's entirely up to you. We give you all those tools. And by the way, working with the team at iOCO, of course, we can build out that architecture with you. So again, it's relevant to your needs. The other thing that I think is particularly important here, and as with workspaces, is all of this resides in the data center. So from a security perspective, of course, you're not having to be concerned with data bleeding out or leaking out onto a device, because effectively, and we describe this as secure pixels, effectively what you're seeing on screen with, you're just interacting with into the data center. Now, as with workspaces, this service is fully managed, pay as you go. But one thing that's different to a workspace is with workspaces, we deliver virtual desktops one-to-one. So every user gets their own virtual desktop. And of course, it's built in that fashion. So one user, you pay by the hour. And of course, that's your pay as you go model. Fully managed again. But with AppStream, it's slightly different. With AppStream, we actually have a concurrent model. So if your organization has 1,000 individuals or 500 or 200 or whatever it is, but actually only a handful of those, maybe 50% of those or 30% of those are using the service at any one time, then of course that is effectively what you're going to be billed for. Now offline, we can go into a lot more detail on that, and we can build out commercial models with you so that it's relevant to your business. We can look at the demand curve of usage, and we can ensure that we're maximizing your bang for buck. The other cool thing, of course, which is really cool about this is, if you're thinking about service delivery into certain markets, things like, I'm going to say, the education market again, with AppStream, you can deliver hundreds and hundreds of applications, and you can profile them down to very small numbers of users. So, for example, you've got 25,000 students and staff, but actually you've probably got a number of different user personas within that. Well, we can be quite tailored to the profile of particular users. So when they come into their AppStream environment, they're just getting the apps that are relevant to them. The other beauty about this, very similar to workspaces, is these services are available all over the world. So if you're an ISV, for example, and you're looking to deliver your software in another region, then of course this is fantastic, because of course we can deliver AppStream to other regions based around obviously where these services are available in AWS data centers. So we can scale as your business scales. We can flex up, we can flex down, depending obviously on your needs. The other thing that I just wanted to cover, because it was something that came up during the meeting when we were in South Africa recently, is ISVs. How are we supporting ISVs or independent software vendors? We've seen a number of ISVs, or what we describe as ISV use case, looking at AppStream as a way for them to not only SaaSify, as we describe it, sorry, it's a bit of an AWS term, SaaSify or deliver SaaS-based applications, but also using AppStream for things like demos, trial and training. Because of course, the beauty of this is you can move traditional or legacy applications to a cloud-based environment without massive rewrite. Or another example, if we think about demos or trials, in a more traditional setting, businesses would put their application on, in their website. It may be the trial environment. Someone will go to it. They'll put in their details. They will download that application or that trial that they want to have a go with. And of course, the problem with that is if I'm a business, if I try and download it and it fails, the business doesn't know. I don't know how many times I've tried and failed it, but the beauty of these services, of course, because it's all running in the cloud, everything that's going on for the ISV is, it's visible to you. So, it gives you additional, I guess, flexibility and engagement with customers that you may not have had in the past. And of course, if you happen to know that someone is playing with that trial or that demo, and they've been using it for an extended period of time, then of course the beauty of that is that someone's interested in your software. If they've tried to download it a number of times and it just keeps failing, then of course you may want to interact with that customer in a slightly different way. Now, of course, as with workspaces, we deliver this service, under a pay-as-you-go umbrella. Workspaces, we have about 15 different instance types. With AppStream, we have well over 30, whether it be Windows or Linux, and we've got different, I guess, different instance types that sit within that. And even the beauty of AppStream is we now introduced a service last year, and I think we can take the detail of this offline, but we introduced a service called Elastic Fleets that if you can deliver an application, and by the way, this doesn't even need to be an ISV, it could just be a business that has an application they deliver out for their customers, and you have complete control over that piece of software, and you can deliver that in a certain way. We can even do second-based billing. Now, if you're a business that's trying to commercialize software delivery, this is fantastic for you, because you can build a commercial model that maybe you're charging out for in a certain way, but of course you're just being billed for its usage in per second or by the hour as the standardized way forward. The last service that I was just going to touch on is a service again that we launched at the back end of last year. And I did see a particular interest in this service when I was in South Africa recently. And this is one called WorkSpaces Web. It's a pretty straightforward service if you're reading what's on the screen here. WorkSpaces Web is in essence a secure browser environment that can deliver things like website for sort of intranets or even simple sort of SaaS services. So if I think about in South Africa, I was doing some conversation with teams that are working in the mining industry, for example, and they were looking for ways that they could actually deliver out a service to their workers that may be working in the mines, but they don't provide them with a device. They don't even necessarily give them a way to gain access to certain internal tools or certain particular services. So this is a methodology that we can provide to their users, super secure Chromium-based browser environments that they can deliver things like pay slips or anything related to their job or function, but they can do that on a device that is their own, or they might have a kiosk sat within the environment that they can gain access to. Now, the beauty of this, of course, again, flat rate pricing. We deliver it for as little as sort of $7 per user per month. And again, no commitments, no upfront costs, etc., etc. So this is fantastic for those we would class, I guess, blue-collar type workers, those that wouldn't necessarily gain access to your traditional services from an IT division. Lastly, just to recap some of those particular solutions that I mentioned. What I would say, it is definitely a case of not one size fits all. And what's really important here is to ensure that when you're thinking about the different users or particular environments you have within your business, make sure that you're looking at the different services that we have, or in fact, other vendors, that's entirely up to you, but think about those users, think about their function, think about their job, and really start to tailor out the service to their particular need. And it's interesting because, we have a number of times, whereby you could have a particular worker or particular user, and they need more than one. So if I think about, a really high-end computer science or designer or a developer, in some cases, they need a high-end environment to support a particular service. You think about developers, for example, developers that are using sort of Docker or nested virtualization, and they have really high-end compute requirements. Yeah, it might be better to deliver that within an AppStream environment. But at the same time, they still need a fully persistent desktop because they're doing daily tasks. So it's not unusual for us to see customers that are using both environments dependent on their needs. What I would say is when you're reading or looking at this slide, start to think about how would this apply to your business. I guess one of the best ways I think is right at the early part, I had each of these different personas effectively laid out as environments that we've seen evolve over the course of the last few years. I'm pretty confident that some of these, if not a number of these, will align to your own environment. And what I would say is, as we're starting to build out a business case, or as we're starting to build out a bit of a plan, think about where you would be applying these particular services. The other thing I was going to say is, if you do have applications you want to deliver, or in fact, you just have remote workers that are in the field, then of course make sure that the service is right for their needs. In addition, as you would expect from AWS, these services now have increased exponentially over the course of the last few years. More and more organizations are looking to us to support them in the delivery of their services. within their organization, whether that be, to their own users or their own user base, whether that be to contract workforce, or in fact using our services to deliver their own software. And on the screen here, and in terms of software delivery, you've got Men & Machine, which is in Germany, Exeter in Germany, Multiview, a Canadian organization, Autodesk. So it's really, really expanding, a great volume over the course of, well, certainly since the pandemic. The other thing I'll call out, just because I always get asked this question, is how much do these services get used in Amazon itself? Well, to give you a guide, Amazon has about 150,000 workspaces deployed internally. And I think we've got about between 3 and 5 people that manage that deployment. So that gives you a sense of how much management this needs to actually be delivered. And bearing in mind, 150,000 people is a lot. So if you're thinking about just a few hundred or a few thousand, this is something that can be managed very quickly, very efficiently via the console, the AWS console, that you have that complete flexibility and control. And I think it's important to remember, and I've said this a few times, is this service being a managed approach, of course, you don't need to be considering all those different components. And I think one of the things that we've seen, is people's usage of things like Microsoft, as a core for remote working, now being available as part of WorkSpaces is certainly a massive plus in terms of the evolution of these services. So in terms of its delivery, we have these services available all over the world. We now have Amazon Workspaces available in Cape Town, and we're working really, really hard with the team to get the other services in Region 2. What I would say is I've already got a number of customers that are using WorkSpaces Core, Web, and AppStream in region, albeit not necessarily out of Cape Town. And this is a really good starting point for us to build out that case for the future. The other thing is we've done a lot of work in terms of the underlying protocol on these services to minimize things like latency, etc. But we appreciate that things like data residency, especially in public sector, can sometimes be a challenge. So we're working really hard to get those services in region. And what I would say is if you do think you've got a requirement for these other services, absolutely reach out to us, because the more, more requests, the better the business case we can build, the more likely we are to get those services in country quickly. Okay. So just one last slide from me, and obviously to thank the team at iOCO. There was another topic that I was asked to sort of include in this particular session, and I wanted to make sure that I touch on it. And that was around, the work that we're doing in sustainability. We over the course of the last few years have put a lot of time and energy into ensuring that as AWS, we are a truly sustainable business. And one of the things that we're not targeting, we are going to meet the goal of, is being 100% renewable energy by 2025, which is 5 years ahead of our original target. Why is this important? I think in South Africa is because when you do have challenges or something goes wrong, you don't have to, you rely on your own data center because you've got a power outage, you've got no failover. We're obviously operating a 100% renewable energy by that point. I think we're in the 90s at the moment. But of course, that's perfect for your business because it means that your data center, your data, your business is always going to be supported by our own organization. That's supported by the Climate Pledge, of which we were original founder, with the view to be carbon neutral, I believe, by 2040, which is awesome. But we're also looking to invest in things like, what we're doing around water and being water positive by 2030. It means we're going to be, using less water than we're actually putting out there into the market. So in summary, though, for today, please reach out to the team at iOCO. If there's something here that maybe resonates with you when you were looking at those particular use cases or the different scenarios within them, these services can provide that fully persistent virtual desktop. Alternatively, that selective desktop for just application delivery. The beauty of these services is you can scale up quick and you can scale down as at the same pace. The other thing to think about, of course, is they're available now in your region. This is a business case that I actually worked on myself personally with the local AWS team, and I think it took us it took us a while to get there, but we now have it, which is awesome. I'm really, really keen to take advantage of it. What I would say in terms of next steps is please arrange a call, arrange a session with iOCO. I will personally join that. I'll make sure I'm available to support you. And let's go out there and see what we can do to really transform and modernize your environment. For me, digital workplace modernization is not necessarily let's move everything to the cloud. It's understanding what your needs are and building the service to those particular users. We don't even need to build something new. These services are already available to you. It's just a case of how do we apply them? How do we modernize your environment? Whether that be just taking a laptop and then delivering it in a more modernized way, taking more traditional VDI, VMware, and so on that I mentioned earlier, and actually moving that to a cloud managed service that you can pay for by the hour or by the month. Lastly, as you can see, my contact details are on screen there. The links that you can see on screen, then you can't access them, but you will have obviously them as part of the follow-up. So we'll make sure that the team iOCO are sharing all of this detail with you. But feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to link in with me and just sort of say hi. But in terms of next steps, let's get on a call. Let's understand what your needs are and really dive deep into those and work backwards from the problem. Thank you for now. Alexia, have we got any questions or anything that we want to cover? I don't know how much time we have left. Probably about sort of 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, we've got 10 minutes. So the first question we've got is, what are the advantages of using AWS EUC solutions in contact centers?
Excuse me. So the beauty of these services, of course, within a contact center environment is that this is a managed service, pay as you go, that really sits all perfectly within that sort of task-based role. You don't always necessarily know how much of a service you're going to need. And actually, at the end of each, I guess you would say, shift, you don't need to persist that desktop. So the beauty of a service like AppStream to support the contact center means that you pay for it during the duration of that service, the tools that you need to do the tasks. You can save the work. So if you're engaging with a particular customer, that work can be saved somewhere. It's probably saved into a CRM environment or whatever else. And at the end of that session, it dies. And of course, you can move on and you can go off and do your daily backup. The beauty of this particular service, the beauty of this particular service, of course, it sits within our own data center. It's fully supported, fully backed up, and of course, running renewable energy. So you're always going to have access to what you need and when you need it.
Great. Got 2 more questions here, or 3 more questions. We are currently using Office 365 and MS Office 2016. Does this mean a downgrade when using the Workspace solution?
Good question. I think in this particular scenario, can I make a suggestion, Alexia? Can we take that customer and take that offline? Because I think I'd like to understand the second part of it. The service that we've obviously been working with Microsoft on centers around M365. And so what I'd wanted to probably try and do is understand the Office 2016 and O365 piece a bit better. And so we can ensure that they get exactly the right answer. The other thing that we can do offline is we can share with that customer an FAQ that we've put together around Workspaces and M365, which has a lot more of the detail, if that's okay.
Yeah, so Arthur, we will reach out to you directly for that and set up a session to go through that with you. Then what type of tracking or reporting and analytics is available to track performance and usage?
Sure. So if you happen to know a little bit about AWS, you can certainly look at things like CloudWatch, integration with these services, absolutely. And one of my colleagues in Germany recently wrote a blog around how you can build and develop your own set of metrics supported, out of the box, so with a very limited cost. In addition to that, and by the way, the idea behind that is it starts to monitor usage, who's using the service when, what particular instance type are they using, how long are they using those services for, etc., etc. Why would you do that? Because you need to be able to, to manage, are they using the most optimized environment for them? And if they're not, then are there the tools in place? And I mentioned earlier around things like auto provisioning management, so that you can scale them into a different environment, whether that be moving them to a monthly environment, or in fact start to look at, is this particular instance type too heavy or too light for the service that's being used by the particular user. We have another technology partner that I've been working with for a few years called Nuvins. They actually developed a service called WorkSpaces Manager that sits over and above our service. So they have a set of APIs, and that has a whole host of sort of metrics and a great big dashboard that is permanently monitoring these sorts of services. And that, you know, and they're not the only one. You know, there's a number of other vendors that are doing a similar thing at a low cost. As I mentioned to you earlier, you know, this is low cost managed service. So when we're working with partners like Nuvins, we can't expect them to start charging people, you know, 20 or 30 pounds or, you know, or whatever it is in rand, excuse me. You know, we can't expect them to be charging huge amounts of money per user. So it's something like $1.50 per user per month. So really low cost, but massively heavy when it, you know, comes to content and feedback.
And the last question that we've got in the Q&A is, how does AWS EUC ensure data protection and compliance with these solutions?
In what sense? I'm not sure I necessarily understand the question.
I don't know. That's all that was posted was just around data protection and compliance.
So I guess I'm assuming, and if I'm wrong, we can certainly take it offline with this particular person. Obviously, this is sat within our space. So it's sat within our secure environment. So we will manage, obviously, and ensure that any data that is sat within our space is secure and fully supported, whether it be financially backed under an SLA. In terms of compliances, I think we have in excess of 150 different compliances or compliance environments that we adhere to. So if you happen to have it all operate within a particular market, whether that be finance or healthcare, then of course we've already done the work to look at those mandates or those requirements that those particular markets have. So I can provide that information post-session. It's a very, very long list that we have. I can also provide more data around how we manage the data that's sat within within our data center. So from a security perspective. But what I would say is, because I really want to understand the requirements of that particular person on the call, then I would suggest we take it offline and really understand what their needs are, because I'm not sure that necessarily is giving the best answer.
We got one more that came through saying, if a company decides to migrate their workspace to AWS AppStream, are there any issues that can be experienced or some incompatibilities that need to be anticipated?
If we're talking about application, so if we're talking about application delivery, so with AppStream, it is built on, it's based, two things. Based on a Windows environment or a Linux environment. If your application will run within a Windows environment, then it should run within AppStream. But we always say, and this is part of the shared responsibility model that we have with our customers, is we have to test. You know, because of course there are thousands and thousands and thousands of applications in the world. And of course, we haven't necessarily tested it on every service that maybe goes back 10, 15, 30 years. So therefore, when we build out a plan with a customer, we say, right, let's understand the needs of that service. What are you doing with it today? And and let's try and run this within our environment based on these parameters. But these parameters always need testing. So I'm not sure that, again, this is a really, really specific question that I would definitely say, I want to understand the customer needs. Let's set up a call. Let's understand what that is, and we can ensure that we give you the support. One of the things that we have done is we're working with the team at iOCO, is we have developed some investment to support things like proof of concepts. So if you're interested in running a proof of concept based on these services, when we've had a discussion, of course, we can find some additional funding to help deliver that with relatively low risk. And certainly Alexa and I and Nancy, who was on the call earlier, we've worked closely in development of that, and I'm more than happy to explore that further.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Malcolm. Thank you for taking us through all of this information. I hope all the participants have found this to be very valuable. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. You can reach out to AWS at ioco.tech, and then we will obviously get Malcolm involved. As mentioned, we work very closely with Malcolm, so we can arrange a session and obviously go through your specifications and make sure that you've got all the necessary understandings that you require. So thank you very much for making the time today to listen to Malcolm. Malcolm, thank you very much for your time in sharing all of this.
You're very welcome. Just one last thing, Alexa, just to add. I'm hopeful to be back in South Africa for Summit in September. So if you would like to meet in person, it'd be great to say hi. And we can certainly look at these services in a bit more depth, reach out to the team iOCO, and we can see what we can do to arrange something. But I'm really, really keen to get to know you all and understand what your requirements are and just be, really specific around, your needs. So thank you, Alexa. And thank you to iOCO and all of the team, not just for this particular webinar, but for the work that we did together for the customer day earlier in the year. Looking forward to doing lots more of these. I think this is a fantastic opportunity to talk about our services. But as I say, proof is in the pudding. So reach out to us and let's build a plan together.
Lovely. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week further.
Thank you, everyone. And I look forward to speaking to you all soon.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.